I'm a 47-year-old guy, and my life recently took a turn I could never have predicted. My wife of 10 years, who I thought would always be by my side, left me when I was at my lowest, only to try to come back when my luck changed. A little over a year ago, I had a health scare at work. I collapsed in my office and was rushed to the ER. After endless tests, the doctors found I had a serious liver infection. They explained that if it wasn't treated, it could turn terminal. It was a huge blow, and I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. At the time, my wife was away for a friend's wedding, and I didn't want to scare her while she was out of town, so I kept the news to myself. But when she returned, she saw how pale and weak I looked. I had no choice but to tell her about my diagnosis. I was hoping for some comfort, maybe a hug, or even some words of encouragement. Instead, she just looked at me in shock. I could tell that her first feeling wasn't fear or concern, but disappointment, almost like my illness was an inconvenience to her. Still, I tried to focus on healing, working with my doctor, and managing my job as best as I could. But things were getting tougher. My health meant I had to change my lifestyle drastically: new diet, exercise routines, strict medications. With my health and work both demanding so much energy, I was barely keeping up. During this time, I began to notice my wife pulling away. She was colder than usual, not affectionate, and even seemed uninterested in spending time with me. When I'd try to be close or suggest a night together, she'd brush me off, claiming she was tired or that I should rest. Feeling worried, I confronted her. She claimed my illness was stressing her out, but it didn't sit right with me. I didn't understand why she'd push me away when I needed her support the most. My suspicion grew, but I brushed it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. I threw myself into work, hoping it would distract me from all the stress. In the process, though, I started missing my routines, skipping meals, missing medications because I was so focused on pushing through the day. This, of course, only made my health worse, and I ended up back in the hospital. This time, my wife had to watch me go through another intense medical ordeal. She was there at my side, taking care of me. But even then, her support felt more like an obligation than genuine concern. After a week in the hospital, the doctors warned me that if I didn't change my lifestyle for good, things would only get worse. They suggested I take a long break from work and really focus on getting better. Taking a break felt impossible to me because my work was not just any job. I worked with one of my oldest friends who had built a company from scratch, and I'd been with him since the early days. When he started the company in college, he'd asked me to join, but I wasn't sure it would succeed. Years later, when it took off, he offered me a senior position, and I finally joined him. Since then, I've treated the company as if it were my own, working hard to see it grow. One day, while I was talking to my doctor about my health, my friend overheard and was furious that I hadn't told him about my condition. He insisted I take a paid sabbatical and rest up, but I told him I couldn't step away for long because I was worried about leaving my wife financially insecure if something happened to me. My friend assured me that if my health took a turn, he'd take care of her financially, which gave me some peace of mind. Still, he insisted I take 6 months off to recover and work from home only if I wanted. When I got home and shared this news with my wife, her reaction floored me. I jokingly told her I was fired, hoping to lighten the mood before explaining. But her first reaction was, "Are you dying?" I tried to play along, saying maybe I only had 6 months. Her response? "How will I manage my finances? You should have taken that overseas jobs. We could have been wealthy by now." She wasn't worried about my health. She was worried that I wasn't leaving her enough money. At that moment, I decided to hold back a big secret. Years ago, My friend had given me a substantial share in the company, and over time, its value had grown to over $1 million. Originally, I'd planned to surprise my wife with it one day, thinking it would secure her future. But now, I wanted to see her true intentions. With that conversation, our marriage became cold and distant. She didn't ask about my health, and we barely spoke unless it was necessary. I felt like I was living with a stranger. Then, last month, she asked me when we were getting divorced. I couldn't believe it. I asked if she'd already found someone else, and she nodded without hesitation. She had been seeing another guy and wanted to move on. I was crushed. I shared this with my friend, who advised me to remove her from all my assets. So I did. She was no longer the beneficiary of my equity or any other legal documents. Not long after, I started to realize that my own home was affecting my recovery. Seeing her every day, watching her leave the house dressed up for dates, and hearing her snarky comments about my health was dragging me down. So, my friend offered me a place to stay near our office, a small one-bedroom setup where I could still go to work when I felt up to it. The change was instant. Just being away from the negativity lifted a weight off my shoulders. I moved out, and a week later, sent her the divorce papers. She left a voicemail thanking me for making it easy. There was nothing for us to fight over since she didn't know about my financial assets, and I let her keep the house we'd rented, which had only 1.5 years left on the lease. She assumed I was broke and told me she was grateful to finally be free. Now, with the divorce behind me, I'm putting all my energy into getting healthy and focusing on my work. I've joined a fitness class, follow a strict diet, and work remotely when I can. I still have days where I feel the sting of betrayal, but I'm learning to let go. I'm grateful that I saw her true colors when I did, because if I hadn't, I would have left my life's work to someone who never truly cared. Life has taken on a new meaning now. I'm moving forward, focusing on myself for a change, and feeling hopeful for whatever comes next. I'm thrilled to share that my latest health update has been a real turnaround. Just a few months ago, I was worried I wouldn't live much longer, no matter how many medications or treatments I took. It felt like I was racing against time, but now, for the first time, I feel hopeful about the future. With each day, my health is getting better, and I'm finally starting to imagine a full, happy life. I'll definitely keep you posted if there are any new developments. Thanks so much for all the messages and support. As many of you know, my divorce was recently finalized. After we split, I decided to let my ex, Jay, stay in the house we used to share until her lease was up. Meanwhile, I moved into a small, temporary apartment provided by my company. Living there was refreshing, and I could focus on healing, both physically and emotionally. One day, I had to stop by the house to pick up some of my belongings. I was expecting an awkward moment, but nothing like what actually happened. When I walked in, I was stunned to find another man had moved in with Jay, her boyfriend, AP. He looked embarrassed and approached me, stammering an apology and asking me how long I had left to live. I just smiled at him, feeling unexpectedly calm. Seeing Jay with someone else might have hurt once, but now I actually felt relieved. They could have each other. I was moving on. With my health improving every day, I decided to make some big changes. I poured myself into work, and honestly, I'm feeling more fit and energetic than ever. Staying in the office building meant I could work at my own pace and focus entirely on myself. Now that things have settled down, I'm ready to make some other life adjustments. I plan to sell part of my investment portfolio and buy a new place where I can fully start over. Although my friend says I can stay at the office apartment as long as I need, I don't want to overstay my welcome. In the middle of all these changes, I received a surprising text from an unknown number. It turned out to be P's wife, who asked to meet. Curiosity got the better of me, so I agreed. When we met, she looked at me with a mix of surprise and confusion. She said, "You don't look like someone suffering from a terminal illness." That's when I realized Jay had been telling people I was dying. I asked her why she wanted to meet, and she revealed something shocking. AP and Jay had been having an affair for over 2 years, long before I was diagnosed. AP's wife had only discovered it recently, when Jay started flaunting her new relationship, after my illness went public. Now, IP had moved in with Jay, leaving his wife and family behind. She explained that Jay had been interested in AP's inheritance, as he'd received a significant amount from his late father a couple of years ago. She believed Jay had seduced him for his money, and she was devastated. AP's wife told me that she didn't want to lose her family and still hoped to reconcile with AP, so she asked for my help to expose the truth. I shared some key details with her, letting her know that Jay was only renting the house and didn't own it. AP's wife looked relieved, thanked me, and left. I could tell she had plans to use this information to her advantage. The very next morning, my phone was flooded with calls, texts, and even voice messages from Jay. Apparently, AP's wife had confronted him, and now Jay was furious at me. She kept accusing me of lying about my health and hiding details about my recovery. It was oddly satisfying to hear her panicking, knowing the tables had turned. A few hours later, Jay even showed up at my office. I saw her through the conference room window and instructed the receptionist to let her wait. Watching her pacing, anxious and frustrated, felt like a small victory. Not too long ago, I was the one stuck in a web of anxiety and betrayal, wondering where she was and who she was with. Finally, she stormed into my office, yelling at me about the same things she'd said in her messages. I listened calmly, letting her words sink in. She demanded to know why I hadn't told her about my recovery or my plans to buy a place of my own. I just smirked, knowing she was angry because her plans were falling apart. I then asked her a direct question. "How long have you been cheating on me?" She froze, probably not expecting me to be so straightforward. She tried to lie, claiming it had only started after my illness. But I pressed her until she admitted that it had been happening for 2 years. Jay confessed that AP's inheritance was the real reason she'd pursued him, and that she had only stuck around with me for financial security. In her eyes, I was a fallback option. She pleaded with me to take her back, even suggesting that we start over. But I wasn't interested. I had finally seen her true colors, and I knew I deserved better. I asked her to leave, or else I'd call security. I'm excited to share that my latest diagnosis shows I'm completely healed. I've even lost 25 pounds since I started focusing on my health. Looking back, I realize I'd sacrificed so much of my well-being to support Jay. But the moment things got tough, she walked away. AP's wife played her cards well. She confronted AP with the truth, letting him know about Jay's real motives. He'd been defending her, thinking she was genuinely interested in him, but now he felt betrayed. Eventually, AP's wife managed to kick Jay out of their lives for good. Jay tried everything to reach me after that: calls, emails, gifts. She even showed up at my office a few times, but I blocked her on all platforms. I had no interest in letting her back into my life. Now, I've bought a cozy 2-bedroom penthouse of my own, decorated just the way I like it. It feels amazing to have my own space, a place where I can feel completely at peace. A few friends and family members have even suggested I start dating again. They're encouraging me to check out dating apps, especially ones tailored for people starting over. Although I'm hesitant and a bit nervous about online dating, I might give it a shot. I just want to avoid any more drama or heartbreak. When I, 29M, moved to a new city, I met my future wife, and we quickly fell in love. After dating for a year, we got married, and things felt perfect. However, just 2 weeks after the wedding, my wife planned another business trip with her boss. Since we were still in the honeymoon phase, I was hoping she'd stay home. But instead, we had our first big fight. She called me unreasonable and went on the trip anyway. Feeling hurt and confused, I started to wonder if there was something more behind these trips. I shared my concerns with a few friends who all agreed something didn't feel right. It's a story I'll never forget. Something felt wrong from the start. My wife's coworkers and friends acted strangely around me, exchanging quick glances whenever her name came up. At first, I brushed it off, convincing myself it was nothing. But the tension was unmistakable. It was like they knew something I didn't. I wanted to ask outright, but I didn't know where to start. Instead, I waited. After all, I'd get my answers when she returned from her business trip. She finally came back a week later, acting as if everything was normal. I kept things cool, acting relaxed so she wouldn't notice my suspicion. I decided to dig deeper, but I didn't want to set off any alarms, so I started small. That night, I attempted to unlock her phone while she was asleep, but she'd changed her passcode. Undeterred, I paid close attention to her movements over the next few days, hoping to catch her entering the new code. Eventually, I did, and I made sure to remember it. When I finally had the chance to go through her phone, my heart pounded with anxiety. Deep down, I wanted to be wrong, to find nothing but routine messages and work emails. But what I uncovered was nothing short of devastating. Her boss's name was saved as a woman's contact, but the conversation threads gave it all away. She and her boss had been sending each other flirtatious messages and, worst of all, intimate photos. The reality of her betrayal hit me like a freight train. She had been unfaithful all along. As I read further, the pain only deepened. Her business trip had been nothing more than a getaway with her boss, which she even referred to as her real honeymoon. That phrase alone was a knife to the heart. She had used our marriage to disguise her affair, to quiet the rumors about her relationship with him. The perks, the promotions, the special treatment at work, none of it had been earned on merit. It was all a result of their affair. I felt like a complete fool. How had I missed the signs? I couldn't process the betrayal. Here was this woman I had committed my life to, the one I thought I'd share a future with, but it had all been a lie. I was furious, hurt, and felt like my world had been turned upside down. However, I still had enough presence of mind to take screenshots of the incriminating messages, sending them to my phone to keep as evidence. I deleted any trace of my actions to keep things under wraps for the time being, at least. In my anger and frustration, a plan began to form in my mind. The next day, she had a major presentation to give. That night, I took her computer and altered her slides, carefully adding one of her intimate photos with her boss on the second slide, leaving everything else untouched. I knew the impact this would have, and I felt conflicted, but my emotions were in control now. I wasn't going to let her continue lying and manipulating everyone around her. The following morning, she left for work without a clue about the changes I'd made. About an hour later, my phone buzzed, and her frantic voice came through, barely coherent through her hysterics. She was furious, screaming that I had ruined her life and destroyed all she'd worked for. Apparently, she had gone through her entire presentation, only to realize, too late, what I had done. That single photo had exposed everything: the affair, the deception, All of it in front of her colleagues and her boss's family members who had been attending the presentation. She rushed home in a rage, yelling and demanding answers, blaming me for everything. Her fury filled the house, and she even tried to attack me in her anger. I asked her to leave, but she refused, escalating the situation even further. Realizing I needed backup, I called her cousin, who lived nearby. When she arrived, I calmly explained what had happened and asked her to help manage my wife, who was still raging uncontrollably. Her cousin guided her out of the house, but she didn't go quietly. She shouted accusations and insults all the way to the door, creating a scene in front of the neighbors. After the dust settled, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some control, a path forward. I filed for an annulment almost immediately. We'd been married for less than a month, and I wanted to sever all ties as quickly as possible. I couldn't bear the thought of staying connected to someone who'd betrayed me so deeply. Since that day, she has tried to patch things up, but I've remained firm in my decision. When she attempted to reconnect with her boss, hoping to salvage that relationship, even he turned her away. He chose to focus on his own family, leaving her to deal with the fallout on her own. Now, she's a shell of the person I once knew, lost, regretful, and isolated. She threw away a genuine relationship for a fleeting affair and sacrificed her marriage, her reputation, and her job in the process. I can't say the situation left me unscathed. I'm still dealing with the emotional trauma, trying to process how someone I loved so much could hurt me like this. I've thought long and hard about all the time, energy, and emotion I invested in this relationship. It's painful to admit, but it was all for nothing. She never loved me, I was just a pawn in her game. I'm taking it one day at a time, focusing on healing and moving forward. The annulment is still in progress, but I already feel a weight lifting. There's a lesson in all of this one. I wish I hadn't had to learn this way. It's a harsh reminder that trust is precious, and sometimes even those closest to us aren't who they seem. For now, all I can do is wait for the legal process to finalize, so I can truly leave this chapter behind and start fresh, with a newfound resilience and a commitment to never settle for anything less than real love.